We now learn how to find the inverse function for linear functions that can be written as f of x equals to x over a plus b. In other words, these are linear functions in which x is being divided by a non-zero number. So for instance, by the end of this tutorial, we should know how to find the inverse function of, say, f of x equals to x over 7, or even f of x equals to x over 4 plus 12. Now we're going to learn the method with a couple of examples, so let's go right ahead and get started. As a first example, we're given the function f of x defined as f of x equals to x over 3. And we need to find an expression for its inverse function. So I'll start by moving this question to the side, like so, and now we can get started. So the function we're dealing with here is f of x equals to x over 3. To find the inverse function, we follow the same two steps that we saw in the previous tutorial. Remember, those were, step 1, we need to rearrange y equals to x over 3 to make x the subject. Now, looking at this equation here, we can see on the right-hand side that x is being divided by 3. So to get rid of this 3, we need to multiply both sides of the equation by 3. That would look like this. 3 times y equals to 3 times x over 3. And now, on the right-hand side of this equation, we can see that x is being multiplied by 3 and divided by 3. But since those two operations cancel each other out, we can cross out these 3's, and we're now left with 3y equals to x, which we can write as x equals to 3y. And that's our first step done. We've now made x the subject. We move on to step 2, and in step 2, we start from the expression that we just found, that was x equals to 3y, and we swap the x and the y. In other words, x becomes y and y becomes x. So that would be y equals to 3x. And at this stage, the expression we have on the right-hand side is the inverse function. So we can now state the final answer. The inverse function of f is equal to 3x. And we're done. Let's look at one more example. Again, we're given a function f of x defined as f of x equals to x over 5 plus 1. And we need to find an expression for its inverse function. As always, I'll start by moving the question to the side, like so. And so the function that we're dealing with is f of x equals to x over 5 plus 1. And now to find the inverse function, we follow our two-step method. Remember, step 1, we need to rearrange the equation y equals to x over 5 plus 1 to make x the subject. Looking at the right-hand side of this equation, we can see that x is being divided by 5, and we're adding 1 to that result. So I'll start by getting rid of this 1, and since it's being added to the right-hand side, I do so by subtracting 1 from each side of the equation. So that would be y minus 1 equals to x over 5 plus 1 minus 1. Now on the right-hand side, the 1's cancel each other out. So we can cross those out, and we're left with y minus 1 equals to x over 5. We can now see on the right-hand side that x is being divided by 5, so to get rid of this 5, we need to multiply both sides of the equation by 5, which would look like this. 5 times, in parentheses, the entire left-hand side, y minus 1, equals to 5 times x over 5. Now, on the right-hand side, we see that x is being both multiplied by 5 and divided by 5. And those operations cancel each other out, so we can cross out those 5's. And we're now left with 5 times, in parentheses, y minus 1 equals to x. We can distribute this 5 across the parentheses, which leads to 5y minus 5 equals to x, and we can write this x equals to 5y minus 5. And that's the first step done. We've made x the subject. We move on to the second and final step, step 2. And in step 2, remember, we start from the expression we just found. That was x equals to 5y minus 5. And all we have to do is swap the x and the y. In other words, x becomes y and y becomes x. So that would be y equals to 5x minus 5. And at this stage, we're done. The expression on the right-hand side of this is the inverse function. So we can go ahead and state the final answer. Inverse function of f is equal to 5x minus 5. And that's the final answer. And that's it for this tutorial.